precious because of the tempo of our lives at the moment, especially in the forces, and make sure he keeps his own bank account.
Good news or bad news, at Camp Bastion they have learned to keep their minds on the job at hand. Their families may get caught up in the royal engagement, but here there's always another mission ahead. George Alagiah, BBC News, Camp Bastion.
Well, I thought it was really touching, wasn't it, the way the Sergeant Major there referred to Prince William as a fellow officer, as a fellow serviceman. It's interesting that this place, when you walk around, it's a place of huge patriotism. You wouldn't be surprised about that. It's almost tangible. And I think it's in that spirit that they, to a man and woman, I think, welcome today's news. Sophie, back to you.
George, thank you very much. Well, our royal correspondent Daniela Relph is with me here at Buckingham Palace. You were there in the room when the couple gave their first press conference together. It's the first time, for many people, that we've ever heard her speak. What impression did you get of the couple together?
It is indeed the first time we've heard them speak. It's also heard her speak. It's also the first time we've seen them together, really, properly, for any period of time. We've normally just seen these snatched photographs that have been taken of them. So it was fascinating to watch them appear in this grand state apartment of St James's Palace. But I have to say that all eyes were, of course, on Kate Middleton. How she would cope, watching her body language, how they interacted with one another, how she sounded. And what struck me was just how composed she seemed, how together she was in what could have been a very difficult situation for her. She did speak quite quietly when we heard her, perhaps a sign of a few nerves, but generally she was incredibly unfazed by the very public situation that she was in. And I think perhaps it is a sign that she will find the transition from her private life to this public royal life that she will lead, of course, ultimately being Queen. I think perhaps she will find that transition less tricky than some people have predicted.
Daniela, thank you very much. The time is 6:15. Our top story tonight. Prince William and Kate Middleton have announced their engagement. The couple will marry next year. And later in the
breaking
programme,
news this morning, a royal engagement. Prince William finally pops the question. He and Kate Middleton
will have reaction from around the world and here at Buckingham Palace.
And coming up on the BBC News channel, we'll have the first television interview with Prince William and Kate Middleton since their engagement, as well as all the reaction to their announcement. We'll bring you that at 7 o'clock.
The Justice Secretary has announced that compensation believed to run into millions of pounds will be paid to 16 former detainees held at the American military prison Guantanamo Bay. The settlement paves the way for an independent inquiry into allegations of British complicity in the torture of detainees held by other countries. Our Home Affairs correspondent Daniel Sandford reports.
This case harks back to the chaos of war after 9/11. America invaded Afghanistan and suspected terrorists were picked up across the region. Some were British, and what happened to them next became the subject of a highly damaging claim for compensation, which ministers have now settled without admitting liability.
The government has now agreed a mediated settlement of the civil damages claims brought by detainees held at Guantanamo Bay. The details of that settlement have been made subject to a legally binding confidentiality agreement.
The most infamous case is that of Binyam Mohammed, who was flown by the Americans to Morocco, where he says he was tortured and asked questions sent by MI5, though they say they didn't know where he was being held. But 15 other cases were also settled today, all men who claimed that in some way the British intelligence agencies had responsibility for their mistreatment. One is still in Guantanamo Bay. The total payment runs into millions of pounds. Ministers said they had to settle, or the case would have cost tens of millions.
Ordinary decent people out there are going to think the world's gone mad. Here we've got people making wild, unsubstantiated and baseless allegations of torture, getting more money than victims of terrorism here in London.
This case has proved a huge distraction for the intelligence agencies, tying up dozens of officers, ploughing through hundreds of thousands of documents. And the scrutiny isn't over yet. There will still be an inquiry led by a judge into the allegations of collusion in torture. Daniel Sandford, BBC News, at MI5 headquarters.
New figures for the BBC indicate there could be 4 times as many young carers in the UK as previously thought. The survey of 4,000 secondary school pupils across the UK suggests that 700,000 young people have personal caring responsibilities. With the details, here's our home editor, Mark Easton.
Each morning, before she heads for school, 12-year-old Victoria nurses her mum.
Please don't fall.
I won't.
She mixes her drugs, checks her medical equipment, administers an injection. A routine that's been going on since she was 7 years old and her mother suffered a brain tumour that left her partially blind and unable to eat.
Sometimes it's a pain because I really want to go out and do something. And then I want to do it because she's my mum, don't like her. Well, not like her, but I love her.
Do you ever think that it's perhaps, you know, a bit unfair that your daughter should have to take such responsibility?
Yes, I do believe the social services should be around to